All right, we are live. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm here with Jackie from Jackie's Gaming Art. This is a treat. Jackie and I go a little ways back when I was first putting up work from my Dreamside project. And I got in touch with Jackie, who's a very ambitious and creative artist and quite skilled, if I may say so. So I'm really pleased that Jackie was willing to take the time and jump on and have a conversation with me tonight. So welcome, Jackie.
Thanks.
Yeah. So why don't you do me a quick favor and let everybody know just a little bit about who you are?
Okay. I'm a 23-year-old artist from Canada. I've always been super into video games. First game I ever played was Donkey Kong Country with
Yeah.
Dad, and we absolutely loved it. Um, Growing up, I was always into doing art. I never knew that it was something that I was going to want to do with my life until about a year after high school when I started experimenting with actual digital art. Um, Started making lots of contacts online, looking up YouTube tutorials and everything, trying to improve from there. And it's been going a little bit slow, but it's getting there, and I've been enjoying it a lot.
That's great, and it's been a lot of fun to watch your progress. So I think that something that I've noticed, and friends of mine have also noticed who have seen your work, is that you are growing as an artist very quickly, quicker than I think most people do. So I don't know if that's raw ambition. I don't know if it's a combination of ambition and talent, focused skill development, whatever it is. But you do have you've shown so much of a change over really a quite a short period of time now. I mean, I'm quite a bit older than you are. I'm not exactly sure. I think you're somewhere around 23. You said, right?
Correct.
And so yeah, when I was when I was your age, I really couldn't draw very well at all. And so so it's really been a treat to kind of be able to see that in your work. So obviously you have a constant stream of art that you're putting up. And so I'm curious about how it is that you go about choosing the things that you're going to work on.
Um, when I was starting out, a lot of it was just me doing fan art of the characters that I liked. And I think part of that was just helping me get in practice trying to replicate something that I'm familiar with. Um, and the past year or so, I've started kind of been gravitating towards doing my own original stuff to kind of start building a, professional portfolio for me to be able to start handing into game studios and hopefully go from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Putting together a how can we put this, a professional collection of intellectual property, of original intellectual property. That's the fancy way of putting it. So yeah, you're making your own ideas and concepts, and so that's great. So you've been able to kind of observe, be inspired, and then translate it into something else. So yeah, so we first connected back when I had first was first launching some of the Dreamside content, when I was trying to kind of build up a following for myself, and I was working on the art from the first book. And I thought, well, one way to do this is to kind of share it with people instead of trying to do daily progress updates and that sort of thing. I thought I'll do like a monthly thing, where I'll do like a video book chapter, and that's when we connected. Of course, I didn't know a thing about how YouTube works, and I thought, no, it's better to put up one video every month. It'll be great because then people will see, like it'll kind of build up anticipation, and then there will be like something that's really well polished that will be released. And I found out that what YouTube really likes is an awful lot of content that's not terribly well planned. So that's what I'm doing now, an awful lot of content that's not terribly well planned. So you seem to be very adept at working with social media, and you're very, very frequent with your posts. You're putting up a lot of art, and so that's great to see. It's very inspiring. For somebody like myself, it's really neat to see somebody who, not to keep bringing up your age, but just to see somebody who is younger, who is so ambitious and going ahead and doing this, kind of on her own without, I like to use the word permission. So that's really awesome to see, and I know that that's going to turn into some great things. It might not be totally clear what studio you might end up at, or what professionally you might end up doing, say 10 years from now. But it's going to be awesome, whatever it is, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you end up doing, Jackie.
Yeah, there's a lot of times when I doubt the amount of progress that I'm making and the abilities that I have, but I at the same time I do get quite a few people that make comments, positive comments about the amount of improvements that I'm making, and it kind of gives me that little extra push to keep at it and keep going where I'm going. It's a little bit more difficult for me. I haven't actually uh, gone to school for anything like this. I did take 1 year of visual arts at a local college, but it ended up not being anywhere geared towards the kind of stuff that I wanted to do. So I never continued on with that. Um, I have been kind of interested in um, looking into night schools or something that I can do to kind of take things further from where I'm at right now. Um, in saying that, there are also tools that I need to be able to do that. That's kind of one thing that's holding me back. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in terms of tools, are you talking about things that would let you move into, say, 3D work or that sort of thing? Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great world, and I think you'll transition. I mean, we've spoken in the past about this. I think you'll transition really well into 3D because you have a very conscientious, sort of careful method of working that I think will work well with 3D. Because 3D, really, you're sort of, I don't want to say you're working on the microscopic level, but you're definitely sort of in a you really zoom in close on things and kind of nudge around little details, and that seems to be something that I see in your artwork naturally. So that leads me to wonder a little bit about your artistic process, because I have seen some of your speed videos that show drawings that you produced, but I don't really have a tremendous feeling for how you actually like to draw and what your focus is, but you can tell that there's a careful approach. So can you talk a little bit about the process of putting together your art?
My process, it's pretty funny. Because most of what I've learned is based up on a foundation of watching other artists on YouTube and their tutorial videos. Every now and then, my process is kind of changing and evolving on its own, and I think that goes into the whole um, the amount of improvement that I've been making with my artwork. And I, I usually, depending on what I'm doing, my sketches are, I know every artist says this, but they're extremely messy when I start out. They're just a complete mess. But lately, what I've been doing is I've been starting with grayscale as opposed to just jumping into straight color, which is what I'm used to.
Hmm.
I find it's helped me speed up the process quite a bit, which is something that I kind of lacked in the past little bit. I find I'm a little bit of a perfectionist with my artwork, so I take too long trying to get the right colors and the right shading and everything. But with the grayscale, I can just focus on the values and then worry about the colors and everything afterwards, which is really nice.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's a great technique. I've used that quite a lot in the past. I also have. Yeah, I like to think that you and I maybe have kind of similar minds in terms of how we approach art. We both clearly have a perfectionist attitude. You almost may be worse than me. I'm not entirely sure. I always thought I get made fun of all the time by my art friends because I will spend too much time doing and redoing and redoing and redoing endlessly, just over and over again. You might actually be worse than I am. I haven't really, because I can sort of see it in your work where you can see, due to the detail and polish, that's mainly the polish that's in the piece. I think that might be, I don't know if I want to call it the feature of your art that I think is strongest, but I think it is that you polish things to an almost impossible degree where uh, you're able to take things, given that, like, extremely just quality finished look, that I think is missing from a lot of modern artist work, and part of that I think is because uh, so much of today's industry uh, basically motivates artists. I guess for lack of a better word, forces artists to work very quickly
Oh
and
yeah.
produce things rapidly, and that's important depending on the type of profession you're in. But certainly with comics art, for example, which is the world that I'm breaking into, that speed of production is so important. And how often have you had this experience? Because I do this all the time, where I go to a graphic novel section in a bookstore, a comic book store, and I see beautiful cover art, and then I open the book and I think, that clearly there's an extreme difference between the quality of work that's on the cover and what's inside the book. And I
Yeah.
kind of feel like I've been deceived by the cover art. And this is because, unfortunately, those poor artists, no doubt, had to really rush to get that stuff done.
Yeah, no, that happens all the time. And like that's the whole issue with me right now, trying to improve the speed at which I can put out art. Because I know I do post a lot, but half of it is just, work in progress updates of the stuff that I've been working on for weeks at a time. But it's a little bit difficult to get the time that I need to work on art right now with the stuff that I've got going on. So I
Mm-hmm.
find putting out those updates at least keeps people interested for just the amount of time that I need.
Well, that's actually brilliant, I think, because it's one of the things I really struggle with. Is maybe it's because my mind doesn't work well parsing responsibilities. I used to think I'm a master multitasker, but actually I'm a very poor multitasker. Apparently, there's some things I think I could do well. One thing I find I can do well is I can multitask if the second thing is inspiring the first. So, for example, I'm very good at listening to music and having that inspire my work. What I'm not good at doing is trying to juggle 3 or 4 tasks in my mind. And the problem with social media for me is that when I realize, oh, I have to post in social media, I kind of think about it as a focus task and I have to get it out of the way. And then I can clear my head and focus on my art. But then I realize, oh, I need to post something again in an hour. And so it just kind of becomes a never ending process of uh, constantly worrying about staying up to date on social media. And then I can't focus on my artwork. So I'm quite impressed that you're able to do that.
Yeah, it's not something that's overly easy to do, and sometimes I will end up prioritizing one over the other, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But with social media in particular, you're following, I guess, everybody's so they've got their mindset on the things that they like to see. There's people that appreciate those constant work in progress pictures, and then others that just want to see the finished result. And so trying to cater to both, I think it's beneficial when you um, end up getting into those situations where you accidentally favor one over the other, because then you're unintentionally giving a little bit more to each side.
Right. And yeah, it's one of the unfortunate aspects of that is that there's only so much that you can show. This is something that I really struggled with the dream side videos that I did. So I totally misunderstood how building a social media presence worked. I thought there's so much content where people will kind of push out a lot, but it will be what I consider to be lower quality. I thought what I should do is I'll kind of treat it like a premium platform. I'll put out a YouTube video that will be 7 minutes long, and it will just be jam packed with the best art I can do. It'll be really polished. It'll be one 7 minute video, and that just doesn't work with YouTube. You kind of have to just keep the video content going. And this was kind of at a time when YouTube was changing their algorithms a little bit. Prior to that point, I think you could do that kind of thing. Even then, it was a bad idea. But nowadays, in particular, YouTube really prioritizes longer content. And so, like, I don't want to say necessarily lower quality, but definitely longer content. And longer content is by nature going to be lower quality. So, one of the things I really messed up on, and this relates, I think, directly to what you just said, is that I would work for a month tirelessly on one of those Dreamside chapters, and I would produce maybe 22 pieces of very detailed illustrated work over the course of 30 days. And I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't show any of it because I didn't want to spoil any of it. And then I would put it all into a video. And 5 people would watch the video. And so, but it was like I was totally backwards in terms of how modern social media works. And I didn't see the value of things like Instagram that let you show progress art, and that's something that I'm really struggling to modify about my process and show more. I'm so conscious of spoilers because this is for a specific project. I'm like, there's only so much you can produce so quickly that I'm like, if I just show off a piece that I've been working on, it might be 4 days of work that I'm just showing all at once, and then I don't have anything else to show. So maybe that's something that you also struggle with.
Yeah, it's just finding that balance really, between what's too much, what's going to start annoying people, I guess, and putting out just enough content to get them excited for whatever it is you're revealing at the end.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting word, annoying people, in a sense. Yeah, because even something with this Kickstarter campaign, I'm trying to be conscious about updates because I say, okay, if I send out an update, that means you get an email,
Mhm.
and I don't want people's email boxes getting inundated. But I'm like, people want updates, but I don't know what that balance is. I'm kind of feeling that out. So let me just jump in here and just let people know if you have any questions for Jackie or myself, go ahead and write them in the chat, and I will make sure that we get to them. This is an interesting. I think this is a pretty to me. This is a really interesting meeting, Jackie, because we I haven't really been able to consult with too many people who are in this category of folks who are promoting themselves on social media in the way that you are. Most of the people I've talked to come from the studio perspective, and they kind of work for locations where the marketing is in essence done for them, so to speak. And so it's not something that, even for myself, that's not that. When I got out of school, I mean, I finished school in 2003.
Mhm.
And at that time, what you did was you went and you either tried to do something independently, which was very, very costly, very expensive, and making that work was almost like winning the lottery. I did try it for a while, but then the other option is, get a job at a studio, and then there will be a marketing professional at the studio. There'll be PR people at the studio who can kind of handle all this stuff. Now that I'm independent, I'm doing it all, and you sort of jumped right into that second way of working right from the beginning, and you're doing it, and that's awesome. So that's pretty cool. And I'm sure from your perspective, there's a lot of concern over, is it working? How do I translate this into a sort of a good regular source of income, basically. How can I make this into a profession? But I think that's building right now for you in a way that is really growing at an exponential rate beyond what I typically see. So I'm very excited about your future, Jackie.
I really hope it does end up going where I want it to. Um, I think I've got a huge passion for games. I know everybody says this, but um, anytime I picked up a new game, just like one of the first things I would admire is just the visuals, all the colors, everything that's going into it. I would sit there and analyze it visually. And it got to the point where I just kept telling myself that's something that I want to do one day. And after I graduated high school in 2013, I believe it was, I think it was a year and a half off before I went and attempted my first year at college. Um, I pretty much just spent that year practicing my digital artwork, looking up YouTube videos, making those online contacts. And it's been gradually growing from there. I'm kind of a very introverted person, so I'm not really used to stuff like this, interviews, whatever you call them, or especially showing my face on camera. That's something that I'm still not quite used to. But uh, with my artwork, it has allowed me to open up a little bit more and take leaps that I wouldn't normally do.
Mm-hmm.
One of those being, Rare was holding a contest a few years ago. It was their Play It First contest for their game that just came out a little while ago called Sea of Thieves.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to enter um, our way of showing the excitement for the game. And I've always really been into pirates, with the whole Pirates of the Caribbean and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I did a digital painting of what it would be like to come across a kraken in the game for the first time. And I went so far as to hire a friend that I had met online. She was a composer, and I hired her to make a pirate themed soundtrack to go along with the speed art video that I did for this.
That's awesome.
That ended up being my entry. and I was the only female contestant that ended up winning out of 6 winners in total. And they flew us out to their studio, so I got to meet all the artists and everything in person and show them my artwork. And even then, looking back at that work, it's, in my eyes, obviously not very good, but they were giving me compliments nonstop, asking me what my plans were for the future, and
Hmm.
that kind of helped, you know, uh, put fire in the passion, so to
Mm.
speak.
Hmm. Yeah. So maybe there's a future at Rare. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, every time they have one of their posts, oh, Rare is hiring. Just about every one of my family members is on it tagging me.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that it's not a question of if, it's when.
Yeah,
It's this is the thing that I always say to both younger artists and myself, is that it never really comes down to whether or not you can make it. It's a question of, is it worth it, with the amount of time it takes, and it's not, that usually sounds a bit more. I'm a really optimistic person by nature, and so that sounds terribly bleak to me. But it's not intended to be bleak. It's actually intended to sound very optimistic, because the thing to take away from that is that for anybody, it's possible to do this. It's just that depending on your skill level, depending on your talent level, it will take a certain amount of time longer to do. You also have to factor in things like, oh, can you make connections around the industry? You know, will a studio post a job opportunity, and then the somebody who works there will have a friend that's kind of been waiting, and they'll kind of jump in before applicants even get a chance to get in there. These sort of things are all factors,
yeah,
but in general, it's not a question of if, it's when. It just comes down to what. I use this example all the time. I say that you got to think about it seeing two bars on a graph, right? And one is the pain, and one is the desire, right? And the as long as the passion, the desire is longer than the pain bar, you'll push through it.
yeah,
It just, there's a certain point for some people where it crosses over, and they say, okay, I've given it years and years and years. I'm so passionate about it, but it's just no longer worth it to me, to push through and kind of overcome. Now, and that just kind of changes person by person. Then maybe they convert it into a passion hobby or something like that. And I think that that's kind of unfortunate when people do that personally, but if they really have that ambition. But with you, it's so obvious that it's a driving passion that will take you all the way there, and it's just kind of a matter of it being the right opportunity. But the other thing that I keep thinking about, Jackie, every time I every time I look at your work, is that you are um, and don't take this the wrong way, but you lack the basis of comparison to understand how awesome what you're doing is. Because, like I say, I talk to people who are industry experts, who are 50 plus years old. They might be ex Disney animators. In fact, when I first moved out to Los Angeles to work with Insomniac, I was chatting with some Disney animators who were part of the kind of the 2D crew, that had sort of gotten laid off when Disney moved into doing more 3D production. They kind of just fired their whole traditional staff. Poor people. And
yes,
a good friend of mine, who became a good friend initially when I met him. It's funny because he's in his 50s, and he said, I really want to do my own stuff. And he sort of talks in the same way that somebody who's 20 will talk about that artistic passion. It never stops.
yeah,
And but even for him, it was this source of stress, like, oh, I don't think I'm ready yet, I have to train. You sort of lack the vision. But he had spent all that time working at a studio, but he still wanted the same thing. So that's something I run into all the time with people in studios, that artists, I think by nature, even if they're very collaborative, uh, always have that passion to create their own things, and they want to see that become reality. And so, although I think you don't necessarily have that studio comparison, like the studio job comparison, so that you can look and be like, okay, it's awesome that I'm doing what I'm doing. But I guess what I'm saying is like you have sort of blindly jumped into doing what I think is the most exciting thing you can do,
Yeah.
and that's why I think you're definitely on the right path, and it's exciting. But I know it's terrifying too when you're on it because you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that must have been a lot of fun going to Rare. As you may guess, Jackie, I'm quite a Rare fan, and the when I was just out of college, I this was back in the like I said, it was back in 2003, and game animation jobs were not highly desired at the time because game animation was not seen as being very. It was still relatively primitive, like moving into 3D animation at that point.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of younger, ambitious animators, like myself at the time, really wanted to work on the best stuff. We wanted to be at the best studios, and so I was applying to studios like Industrial Light and Magic. I had an interview with ILM at the time, and I'd sent the only game studios that I'd sent portfolios to were Blizzard and Rare. And for Blizzard, uh, the um, it was specifically for their cinematics department, so it wasn't even really in the games aspect. So really, the only actual game animation job that I was really interested in was Rare. And I thought if it's going to be a game studio, it pretty much has to be Rare. And there was an unfortunate mishap because apparently they wanted to pull me in for an interview, but I never got that communication. And so I never actually ended up at Rare, but there was apparently a chance to talk about it at least that I kind of dropped the ball on. But if I had ended up at Rare, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So I that's an alternate timeline, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, but what an awesome campus they seem to have.
No, it's amazing there. It was definitely something to see, that's for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and now it's a real pleasure to get a chance to work with a lot of the folks that came from Rare. They're now
Yeah.
have yeah, from Platonic, who have now moved on to work on the types of games that I personally I really miss. And I'm like when I first played ukulele, I was so excited. It was like I was 10. And I just like I couldn't get to my computer fast enough. I think I tripped over myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. And in terms of games, so it sounds like what I'm curious if you can streamline a little bit your direction in terms of where you're trying to go, because I know you talked about character design and something like that, and I'm really trying to feel out if you want to stay independent or if you want to go into a game studio.
I mean, a game studio is ultimately where I want to be. The idea of contributing to an overall project, say like Red Dead 2 that just came out,
Mhm.
maybe more along the lines of what Rare actually does. So Sea of Thieves, to be able to contribute to something like that, even if it's only one small thing, you're only doing characters or environment artwork, whatever. It might seem small to anyone else, but being a part of the company, the amount that you contribute to it is just mind blowing. And the thought of, people all over the world being able to experience something that you created, something that you helped make, is a very, very cool idea to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And so it sounds more like instead it's not as important for you as it is like one of the things that's a driving factor for me is that I have specific stories, specific characters that I want to make a reality. And everything is procedural leading to that. It's all in the service of getting these ideas out. So learning how to draw was in the service of a specific story. It was Dreamside, right? I'm like, okay, I want to make Dreamside. I have a certain way that I want it to be. I need to figure out how to draw my character the right way. And it just took years and years. Right. And I just thought, okay, I just keep my eyes on the prize, which is that finished book done. Right. And so everything for me, it comes down to that. It sounds like with you, you are actually more excited by the idea of being in a collaborative environment where awesome projects are being made and you can be part of that and not necessarily concerned about them being projects of your own creation.
No, definitely. Because I mean, I know I don't have the tools to go and, make a AAA title on my own. That's not something that's going to happen ever. But to be able to contribute to something like that, especially when it comes to characters, because I mean, just if you look at the design for ukulele, they did an excellent job of making you feel like you're reliving your Banjo Kazooie. You know, the character designs for them, it's just something that you fall in love with. I mean, they're so playful and colorful, and it draws people into their personality, their world. You build a connection with the character that you're playing.
Hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you know what? You know what studio is jumping to mind immediately is Vicarious Visions. Do you know about Vicarious Visions?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, yeah. They I've got a good friend there actually who used to work at Insomniac. Yeah, yeah. You should hit them up. They're in New York. Can you work in New York? Now I know you're based in Canada.
I would definitely love to. I've been there once before.
Oh, nice, nice. Well, they're in Albany, which is a little ways away from the city. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's yeah. I hear it's a great studio. They've been around quite a long time, and they did the excellent Crash Bandicoot remake.
yeah.
Yeah, for some reason I have it on my mind that they did the Spyro remake, but they did not apparently.
That's Toys for Bob.
That's a name they thought of immediately.
Yeah.
Like, I need a name. What do I got? Where's Bob? All right, Bob, come here and help me think of a name. Where? Ah, God, clean up these toys. Yeah. So yeah, Toys for Bob. I'm not actually familiar with that studio.
They're the ones that did the Skylander series.
Oh, okay, right. Well,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That's
Yeah.
that's that's cool. Yeah. Now Insomniac, of course, created the original Spyro, but it was before my time. I do actually say that Spyro the Dragon is my favorite Insomniac title, despite the fact that I think actually probably because of the fact that it's a title I did not work on. Because when you work on things, it kills a little bit of the magic.
Yeah, probably.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, but that would be a lot of fun, and I have no idea what Vicarious Visions is working on, but that might be an interesting studio to pursue. So you got some options. I often say that if you know what your goal is, again, it's only a matter of time. Because it's like you keep your eyes on that goal. It's like, okay, I want to work at a studio like this. I want to do this specific type of work, and then it really just comes down to it being a matter of time. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So character design, that's the passion.
Yes, it is. It wasn't always that. Starting out, went with more of a broad decision. I just wanted to do concept art in general. But I was playing around with environment work and stuff like that, and it just didn't really catch my attention as well as working on characters did. So I think that's kind of what helped me steer towards the idea of wanting to work with characters in general. But right now, as you know, all I can do right now is actually do the base designs for them. I can't do any actual animating or 3D modeling, but that is definitely something that I'm hoping to start practicing in sooner than later here.
Hmm. Yeah, I would really love to see you do some 3D work. I'd love to see what you come up with because, like I said, that very careful attention that you have to detail is going to translate extremely well into 3D. And so I think it's a natural fit. It's a shame that the applications to work with 3D are so expensive and costly in terms of power needs as well. But as I often tell people who are trying to break into 3D, a vast majority of the time that you're spending really doesn't require an awful lot of computer power. Because you're usually working with like a low polygon count for the majority of modeling, and then you kind of up it, or you're working in something like ZBrush, and ZBrush has power allocated very well to work with a large number of polygons in a way that Maya, for example, or 3ds Max uh, neither of them really do in the same capacity. So you can jump into programs like Blender, which I understand are extremely robust these days. And the 3D packages are daunting, but it's sort of they're not really terribly complicated if you understand that they have a very, very, very deep range of what you can do. But on the surface, you can get started very quickly. It's almost like jumping into Photoshop in a way. It just you sort of the easiest way to learn 3D, I think, is because this is at least this is how I learned was you stay goal centric, you stay project centric. Like, okay, my goal right now is to learn how to model like a car or something like that, or just keep it like a simple like toy car looking car, right? Not like a super realistic car, where it's simple primitive shapes, and then you can kind of figure out like, okay, I want to bend this corner around. I want to add a few more polygons here. How do I do that? And you just take it one step at a time. And every step of the way that you have to do something, you go onto YouTube and you just type in whatever the operation is, Blender or Max or Maya, and there will be like 50 tutorials immediately to to help guide through that process.
Well, that's exactly what I've been doing for just learning new techniques with the artwork that I do now. It's the exact
Yeah, it's exactly the same. And 3D also is such a powerful skill set to have because it also intersects industries, right? So you are already going. Another reason that I'm excited to see you get into 3D is that you're already going to be light years beyond a lot of 3D artists because you start with a good 2D foundation. And a 2D foundation, what a lot of people moving into 3D might not be aware of is that you don't know what you don't know. And oftentimes people jump into 3D without really having a good foundation of how to draw, anatomy and having a good sense of shape and 3D depth,
yeah.
in their ability to create and understand that, so that when they move into 3D, they really struggle because for the same reason that you work in black and white, by eliminating color, you eliminate a certain level of complexity. You can break things down into singular tasks, right? Well,
Exactly.
moving into 3D compounds it like way beyond what color does, right? It's almost like whatever amount of thought process you save by starting in black and white, take that amount and compound it like by 5 or 10, and that's how much you add jumping into 3D without a good understanding, a good foundation. So it's really really hard, I think, for a lot of people who move into 3D who don't have a good foundation. So you're already starting with an advantage, and I think you'll take to it really. I think you will be. I think you are a born and bred 3D artist. Like I can really see you translating so well into 3D.
I really do hope so. I am excited to start tinkering with it the second I get a chance to. But that is one thing that I have noticed with a lot of the more highly detailed rendered pieces that I've posted. A lot of the comments are,
It's 3D. It looks 3D.
yeah, it looks like it's a 3D model.
Yeah, yeah, well, exactly, and that I think that's also because you do tend to focus on the things that you're choosing to do to your drawings are things that 3D will allow you to do naturally, without really having to struggle so hard. And now what you can do is you can move your attention to detail into basically you can move your attention to detail into a medium that's really going to be beneficial,
Hmm.
for it, and you can let the computer, figure out your rendering of shadows and things like that, and you have to worry about that. What you can do is instead put the detail in that's going to bring out those shadows in a beautiful way and get that nice rendered quality. You can turn on things like radiosity, which is bounce lighting and things like that, and you don't have to worry about painting that in. As I said before, I'm a very goal centric artist, right? So like I have a goal to try and make a project, right? And
Hmm.
however I can achieve the result and get that finished book in with the level of quality that I want, I'm going to do that process. So I did actually begin, unfortunately, not until I had nearly finished all the revamp artwork for Dreamside, but I started working with 3D models for the characters.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, and that's fun. I actually had sort of I use kind of like almost like a flat stone sculpture, sort of looking head for the characters because I do actually just redraw their faces. It's not
Hmm.
worth it to try and work with 3D for that in this project, right? But the bodies still take me quite a long time to draw. And I thought, well, this is something that if I can get a good representation in 3D and I can make that work, and Clip Studio makes that possible. I was able to go into Maya, modify the bodies the way that I want them. I used a separate application to do clothing. What did I use for that? Can't remember the name of it. It'll come to me. So I did clothing and then I did rigging for the characters. They have a bone structure in them, just like everything's set up just like it would be for animation. I'm able to import that bone structure character into Clip Studio and pose it out. And so my drawings for book two, for example, will go faster because I can use this foundation if I choose to do it. I don't know. Maybe I won't. I've gotten faster at drawing, but we'll figure that out. But this is the kind of thing that 3D opens up for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, it really does so much. So yeah, yeah. So if you what sort of things would you want to jump into if you moved into 3D? I assume you would want to take some of your maybe you could even work off some of the illustrations you've already done and try and turn them into 3D.
That's definitely something that I'd be interested in doing. There's quite a few original pieces that I've done in the past that I would love to see actually done in a 3D model.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would be awesome to see. Yeah, yeah. So well, so I'll take that as a guarantee that we'll see 3D from Jackie very soon.
Hopefully.
Yeah, get yourself that copy of Blender.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess test it out and see if it works out.
definitely.
Hmm. Cool. So besides working on 3D, what are some future ambitions? What are what are some dream things you would like to do besides working for a studio? Like what sort of things do you want to do with your art?
Oh goodness. It would kind of be cool to you know, play around with a story of my own, and um I was thinking of doing like a very art focused what's the word I'm looking for? Like a pixelated game. Sorry, like they have for the older Pokemon games.
Mm, hmm.
I know games like what is it, Chrono Trigger. They have cinematics in their game. It's all pixels, but they look absolutely amazing.
Mm, hmm. You mean just pixel graphics in general?
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, so doing like a pixel graphic thing. Yeah, I thought about doing that myself. That is a really neat idea. Now you're thinking doing something like that, but with illustration.
yeah, exactly.
Neat. Yeah, yeah. That's funny. I did actually experiment with that for one project I was kind of pitching at one point. It was to do actually a comic that would be in like pixel graphics, but it would mix the pixel graphics with high resolution art. There's a game that I played that was made by a very ambitious independent group who are not themselves, as far as I know, were not professional game developers, but they sort of were very passionate fans, and they just kind of kept working on it until it was done. It was a role playing game called Pure Solar, and it was kind of made by people who worked on it from around the world. And they did eventually have I think it got most of the initial interest because it was a new game made actually for the Sega Genesis.
Oh wow.
So yeah, they actually printed cartridges for it, and I think you can still buy them. And then they did a Kickstarter campaign to do Pure Solar HD. And what they did with the HD, which I thought was really clever, is they retained the pixel graphics for certain elements, and then they did high resolution paintings for the backgrounds mostly. And it when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this is kind of weird looking, because you have those really low res Genesis sprites, but then you have a high resolution background. But in reality, when I played the game and I played through the whole thing, it was kind of a stunningly rich visually. It was a very rich experience visually. It was really neat to see that combination. And I found that the balance between the HD graphics and the pixel graphics made for a super cool combination because like one made the interest in the other more pronounced.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a contrast thing, right? It's like if you play a game that is all pixel graphics, right? You kind of once you kind of get into the game, you stop thinking about the pixels. You just sort of get lost in the game. And
Mhm.
if you play a game that's HD, you just kind of get lost in that game. But if you see something that combines the styles like that, then you're constantly being made aware of the differences between them, and you get to kind of enjoy the aesthetics of it.
Yeah,
So that would be kind of fun, huh?
it would be.
Well, what would you do with that? I'm curious.
Honestly, I don't know. It's not something that I put a whole lot of thought into, but it definitely is an interest of mine. Um, if I was to do anything, I'd try to come up with as unique of a character design as I could, um, and definitely work on a decent story to go along with it too. there's a lot of research obviously that's going to have to go into, how to even go about producing something like that. But same as anything else that you do, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean, and I think, yeah, that's like a that's the that I guess that comes back to the idea of having a goal, right? It's like, okay, I want to make a 24-page book, right? And the reason I want to make this 24-page book is I have this story I want to tell. For me, the art tends to actually follow the concept. Like, when I'm writing something, and I have about literally, I think I have about 15 projects I want to do that are all kind of waiting in the background. There are a few that are, and they're all different formats. They're all different things. One will be longer than another. I have one project I want to do in the future that's it's really ambitious, and it's definitely very thematically different from what I've been doing. And I have like I want to do an illustrated book, like children's book concept, and that's one that I've struggled with for the longest time, because it's the simpler you make something, the harder it is because you sort of struggle with the meaning behind it. Like, if I have a lot of time, if I have a lot of space, if I have a lot of text, a lot of pictures, I can make something have a lot of meaning. But if I have to jam pack it all into a short sort of period, in terms of the space that I have with the book, or game or movie or whatever it is I'm trying to do, I'm really going to struggle to make that very meaningful. So yeah, it's a project centric thing, and that helps me. That helps inform the art style that I want to work with. And that things like, oh, maybe this project, maybe this book will use 3D graphics. Maybe that's what's right for it, because I want to get like a really soft rendered look, and that's actually something I can do more quickly in 3D. Um, so that kind of informs the style. So as far as your artistic style, I'm curious how that evolved, and how you came about coming up with the way that you like your approach and how you think artistically. I'm curious about how that kind of there is obviously every artist has a sense of consistency in their style to a degree, but I'm curious how yours formed, how you approach the particular style for any piece that you do, because I have seen a variance in the way that you approach things sometimes.
Yeah. Um, I think the majority of it is definitely influenced from, the games that I played and loved as a kid. Anyone that looks at my art is going to know that it's super colorful and vibrant. And a lot of that falls back to those games. Spyro was a huge one. That was one of, when it came out, it was this big, open, expansive world with vibrant colors everywhere. And, Donkey Kong had the same thing. Anything produced by Rare, really, at the time was super colorful. Banjo Kazooie in particular. And, you know, going off the contacts and the friends that I've made online over the past few years too, just watching them evolve themselves as artists and the tutorials that I watch, I've kind of picked up pieces, you know, as I learned from them, and I think it's
Mm,
molded into what I have now.
mhm.
A lot of my work is very, or at least what I've heard from others, cartoon based too. Like that last Spiral piece that I did, a lot of people said it's what he would look like if he was done by Disney.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. Yeah, as I'm looking at it right now, and it makes me think. There's a, yeah, really, really incredible attention to detail on it, and you're doing a lot of stuff that I can see the complexity of. I can see the way that you're. One of the things you're doing that is, at least in the gaming world, and I do try to do this in my own art as well, is you're consciously adding something commonly called ambient occlusion.
Oh yeah,
Uh, yeah, so you're familiar with that?
yeah,
Yeah, and
do
it's
that.
it's great. It really adds a lot of realism to the work.
Yeah,
Mhm. And you also have a great sense of different textures, which is a difficult thing for people to do, is to get a different sensation. Like, if I look at Spyro's skin versus like the horns, it does feel like a different material, and yet it's not too realistic. Like, you're keeping a sense of like that toy-like quality is still there with the character.
yeah. Textures is something I really struggled with actually just like a year ago. And then I decided it was something that I really needed to focus on because every one of my pieces was looking, like a Barbie doll, super plastic, boring. There was no life to it aside from the color that it had.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's when I reached out to a few art friends of mine that are extremely talented in that area when it comes to their use of textures and everything. And they were a huge help as far as things go. I still got some to learn, definitely. Hair textures is something that I've struggled with quite a bit, but it's something that's been improving. Um, like with that last piece that I had, the girl with the horns and the roses on it. Um, it's definitely one of the pieces that I'm more content with in terms of how the texture for the hair looks. I'm sure if I was to redo it now, I could probably make it a little bit better, but you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always that thought. You never stop improving, right? Yeah. 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 There's a lot of detail in that girl with the horns. I don't know what the name of that character is, but yeah, it does have a nicely um, different shader quality. In essence, this is just another reason that I think you're really gonna love working in 3D.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. All right, let's geek out for a little while here, Jackie. So since you're such a game fan, let's talk about games for a little bit because
Right.
that would be a great break for me. I've been pretty focused on this Kickstarter here. So, what are your favorites other than Spyro?
Actually, my all-time favorite game. It seems like not too many people know about it. It was made by a indie company called Whoopee Camp. It's
Oh,
called
it's the pig character,
Tomba 2.
Tomba. Yes.
Evil Swine Return. So the first one I did enjoy, but the second one I just have the most fond memories ever playing that with my older sister when we were little.
Oh, nice. Mm-hmm.
It was such a unique game. They can't remember how they worded it. It was like 3D platforming, but the way they approached it was unique in comparison to something like how they did Super Mario 64.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one of those games that was very sharp, vibrant. The characters were playful, something that you know you built a connection with them, and even the enemies, the evil pigs, they had such personality, even though half the time all they were doing was snorting and running at you.
Mm-hmm.
But it was something that uh, really pulled us into it, and I don't know how many times we went and replayed that game. We just absolutely loved it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I have played that before. I didn't get too far. I don't think I played much at all of the sequel. But yeah, I played a bit of the first game, so I'll definitely have to check out the sequel.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. I know it's one of the more rare games that you can get right now. I had to rebuy my copy a little while ago when I got the sudden urge to play it again, and it cost me about $90 at the time to get it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that it had a really unique vibe. I don't remember too many games feeling quite like that game when it came out.
Yeah, no, it was really well done. The opening intro cinematic that they had was really great too. It had a lot of humor in it that reminded you a lot of the Saturday morning cartoons that you would often watch. At least it did for me.
Hmm. Yeah, it was. I'm trying to remember. It was a Japanese game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. That was awesome. All right, what else we got? What are some other favorites?
Let's see. Croc 2 was another one that we used to play a lot of.
Oh,
Not,
I never played that one.
yeah, it's kind of gone unheard, but it's a lot. I wouldn't say a lot like a mixture between Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, I would say, because you've got that more open world exploration, but more the same play style that you would in Crash Bandicoot.
Mm-hmm. Croc 2. Yeah, it was Croc. I played the original Croc. I think that's what it was, right? It was
Seems to be the sequels that I prefer.
right. Yeah, yeah. Well, in a lot of cases, the sequels can, take what worked with the first game, as long as the sequel's a passionate project. And so, yeah, it's the team can improve upon what they learned from the first game.
Yeah.
Hmm. And try something a little bit more ambitious, hopefully with a slightly bigger budget, so they can have a little bit more help.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and I know you worked on the Ratchet and Clank games too.
Hmm.
Actually, growing up, the Ratchet and Clank games, I never really got introduced to those. I was actually introduced to Jack and Daxter when that first came out. It was the very first game that I owned solely on the very first console that I ever owned by myself, which was the PlayStation 2.
Hmm.
And I remember playing that for the first time, and I was so excited because it was the first video game I ever played where it allowed you to swim in the water.
Ah, nice.
But they've got this feature in it that if you swim out too far, you start hearing this thundering heartbeat that gets faster and faster, and eventually this big, massive orange fish swims up and eats you.
As always happens when you're swimming, giant orange. You got to watch out for those fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if that's a callback to Mario. That's a Mario thing. Yes. Hello to Dragmundus and James, if I'm saying that correctly. And James GSR, good to see you. Howdy all. Just checked out Jackie's Insta. Love the pastel color palettes.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, yeah. You really do have a flair for color, Jackie, and in shaders. I mean, you say that that's something that I guess, weren't as experienced with, maybe just a year ago, about in terms of having different textures and shaders and that sort of thing. I keep calling them shaders, of course, because I still think like a 3D artist, but it really does have that wonderful quality. So yeah, yeah, I keep pushing, man. I really want you to jump into 3D.
I'll get there eventually.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. You now that I'm talking about it, of course, I'm getting more impatient, and I'll keep pressuring you to do it. Like, Jackie, did you download 3D software yet? Yeah. Hopefully your fans online will say the same.
I might play around. I do kind of doubt my PC's quality and ability to be able to run something like that, but I might mess around on my iPad and see what I can't find for
Mm.
3D.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that in the near future, I mean, Apple just announced a new iPad, and with the amount of power it has, it's definitely going to be capable of running 3D software. I think that it's a little tricky because I think programs have to be adapted to the Apple user interface, or the iPad user interface. But I do think that there's a lot of potential for 3D to come to the iPad, which I'm very excited about because I'm using the iPad right now for about 99% of my work.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Now Let's talk a little bit about that actually, because I came from using uh, almost exclusively using Wacom tools, and I still do have access to Wacom tools, but it depends on what I'm trying to do. Of course, you can't use the iPad to do certain things, and so I do still have access to Wacom tools. They're really for very different. I do kind of feel like, to a degree, they're for different groups, and it kind of depends on what you're trying to do with them. Now, I suppose if you're doing more 3D work and you want to move into things like ZBrush and stuff like that, then definitely it's helpful to have access to a stylus of some sort, a pressure sensitive stylus, whether or not it's Wacom. I don't know how important that is, but I do have a classic love for Wacom because it's what I got started with, and they're they're in my history. They were kind of the first ones there, and I think it's important to continue to support companies like Wacom because while there are a lot of options now, Wacom is an artist centric company.
Yeah.
That Apple is doing a great job right now. Frankly, I think providing stuff that's great for artists. But who knows where their focus is going to go in the future. And Wacom is going to be still there, making the stuff that is really necessary for artists.
Yeah. Well, and that's the same thing for me too. They're the ones that I started out with initially. I had one of those little external Wacom bamboo tablets, and that was the very first thing that I went with.
Right. Yeah. And it is amazing what you can do with the the lower sensitivity tools that they have. I mean, you can do really incredible art just with, like one of their simplest tablets.
Yeah, it's it was really good for me at the time. The only program that I had to work with was Paint Tool Sci, which a lot of um, very talented artists still use today. It wasn't long after that when I wanted to make the switch to actually, drawing directly on the screen to see how that works for me. And I went with Monoprice. They had a 19-inch, I believe, pen display
Hmm.
monitor, and that's the one that I went with. It worked quite well for a good portion of the time that I had it. The viewing angles on it weren't that great, but it was so nice to be able to actually draw directly on the screen. The only
Hmm.
issue that I really had with it was because of my computer's capacity to be able to run certain programs and whatnot.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Hmm. Does that tablet also, does that come with the stylus that has a button on it as well?
Yeah, it's got the two rocker buttons on the side.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's something I'm really looking forward to with the new Apple Pencil, is to be able to get that, because it's definitely a missing feature for me, because one of the ways that I like to draw is, at least when I'm doing the more pencil based line art, like I did for Dreamside. The way that I like to draw is I get really rough, and then I'll kind of carve the line. So I kind of treat the line like I'm sculpting it a little bit and try and get the most refined line possible. And that requires a quick switching back and forth between the pencil and the eraser tool. And with the Wacom tablet, I was able to set the eraser to a spring-loaded function on the buttons on the device. So I basically didn't even have to think. I just keep my finger on the spring-loaded eraser tool, and then I would draw, draw, and then I would hold the button down, and suddenly I'm erasing. So it was a
Yeah.
very rapid back and forth between that. I don't think the Apple Pencil is going to be comparable to that too much, but it's still going to be better than what I currently have to do, which is to drag the pencil up to the eraser function in Procreate. Pick the eraser, go back down, and then erase, 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 and then go back up, select the pencil. Because it's seems very simple, but throughout the course of the day, that is literally probably about 20 total minutes of time. Where if I do an 8-hour day, where I'm just like trying to make sure I'm picking the right tool, so it just wastes time. And so I'm happy that they'll have that double click, and hopefully I can assign that to an eraser, so I can look like an insane person, holding the pencil and just tapping it repeatedly over and over again.
Well, it'd be nice with them releasing a full version of Adobe Photoshop on it as well too.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and that I think is going to pave the way. That's one of the reasons I'm very excited about it, is because I think it'll pave the way for more full-featured applications to come to the iPad. I think Apple was smart. I'm very frustrated by their decisions sometimes in this regard, where they kind of limit the connectability of the device. And so I'm very happy that they have a USB port, so I can connect an external monitor.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping that they allow for a mouse to work with it, because right now, irrationally, you cannot use a mouse with the iPad. So if you connect it to an external display, what I could do is I could connect a Bluetooth keyboard, I can connect a Bluetooth mouse, and I could have an external display. And then, as long as there is an app for it, I'd be able to do my full, you know, uh, desktop applications right on the iPad. You can buy a big enough hard drive to support it, but for the what I think is actually kind of the stupidest reason of all, you can't do that because of the lack of mouse functionality. So hopefully they won't irrationally limit mouse control, because there's always that one little thing with Apple. you know it's like that you have to kind of dance around. And that's one of the reasons that I've always historically supported Wacom to such a degree, is because there is also with Wacom, there are always some problems, but the problems are typically, and this sounds much worse, but they're typically like, oh, the device has some sort of a functionality issue, or there might be some, with the companion, I had a problem with the power jack occasionally. But the main usage as an artist, all that stuff was just pristine, because they focused the design on a usability that an artist would need. So I was always very impressed with that.
Well, and that's the thing too with Wacom. They're pretty much mainly geared towards artists and their lifestyle and the tools that they need to produce the artwork that they have. But with Apple, their iPads, obviously, not everybody that buys one is going to be an artist. They're going to use it for taking notes or whatever, or, just as a gift for their kids that they can play games on it.
Well, that's. I think that goes back to the central point that I was making about the focus on the companies. Like, Wacom makes stuff for artists first and foremost. Apple, they happen to have something that's great for artists right now, but they only make up a small percentage of people who buy Apple products, right? So most people who buy an iPad are not artists. Most people who buy a Wacom device are. So because of that, there's always going to be some degree of catering to artists that's stronger with Wacom. And that's why I consider it important to support them, even if you're not thrilled with a particular direction that the company might be taking. And even if right now Apple seems to be providing a great tool for artists, I'm a little skeptical. Maybe it's just my years of experience have taught me that you kind of stick with your long term friends, because you never know what the what the new exciting friend is going to do in a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Dragmunda says, "Congratulations for reaching the goal," and I have to say thank you to that. And so yeah, thank you for everyone's support on helping the ukulele campaign become a success. We did hit 100% yesterday, and we have gotten past the goal now. Jackie was generous enough to be a backer as well, so thank you, Jackie.
Of
Really,
course.
really appreciate your support. Hey, it's exciting, right? This is the first physical book that didn't think this was going to be the case 5 years ago. I was pretty sure that Dreamside was going to be my first book, and I guess in a way it is. But the first book to actually be printed is Ukulele. How do you like that?
Yeah, it's really awesome. I do think that your art style in particular is great to work with ukulele and their world in terms of how vibrant your artwork is, because that's part of like the biggest inspiration for how I do my artwork in terms of color. And I just think it's going to make it look absolutely amazing.
Oh well, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Hopefully it'll print well. I worry about that a little bit, but we'll see. What one thing that I've been trying to look into, and I've said this a few times, and I don't want to promise anything, but I am looking into options to print the pages with a higher color uh, count, basically, where when you print something, usually on a press, you have a four-color press. You have cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, right? The CMYK colors, but I am looking into adding colors to that. Print presses sometimes give you that option where you can add, like one of the colors that prints very poorly, and maybe you've seen this because I know that you like to use it too, is purple. In terms of like the vibrancy of purples and pinks, if you get toward magenta, then it prints very very vividly. But when you're trying to do a purple, like a really intense purple that looks very bold and vivid on the screen, it turns into mud when it's
Yeah.
printed on paper. And so you can do things like have a very vivid purple pigment as an added color, like a fifth color, and be printed. It's expensive, to be able to do that. But if you do it, you can get really stunning results.
Yeah, I can imagine. I didn't even know that that was an option.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can go up. I think you go up as much as something like 12 colors. It might even be able to do more than that. It just depends on the press's capability. And so, yeah, because I bought a printer years ago for doing art tests, and it has I would print out my pages and just kind of test them out, and I'd say, okay, I got to make sure that it looks good on paper as well as on the screen, right? And so I would do these print tests, and I've been fairly impressed with how they've come out. They're still very vivid, very rich, and I thought, okay, I have no problem here. But then I realized it's an 8-color printer, and so it's actually printing at double the color quantity that I'll get on the press. And so my tests have kind of been worthless unless I'm going to print the whole books in 8-color, which would be prohibitively expensive. That's like a crazy thing. But that's something that you can do like as a really cool special edition. Where imagine how cool that would be. You have like an 8-color version of the book that's printed. And it's like super super rich color. I mean, nobody does 8 color books.
Yeah, that would look really, really good.
Wouldn't that look nice? You'd be able to get those rich colors. And the thing that's kind of cool about it is this Kickstarter has surprised me because all of my predictions are exactly opposite from what actually ended up happening. Um, really, like down the line, everything's different. The obvious thing to think is that the lower priced things that you have will sell more than the higher priced, right? So I would go down the line, say, okay, my $30 book will be the highest tier, the highest physical one, right? And then it will kind of just go down the line from there. I'll sell less backer editions than I will cheaper books, right? And I'll sell a lot less of the collector's packs. But the collector's packs are actually selling at something like a 2-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, it
And
didn't
so,
take long for the Grand Tome to be sold out either, did it?
no, no, and yeah, it's amazing to me actually, and Kickstarter shows you things like your average pledge, and the average pledge right now is I think $74, and
Holy.
so yeah, and so what that tells me is that if you can figure out ways of having, uh, it's it says a lot about the people who are coming to Kickstarter that they want things that are higher quality,
Yeah.
and that is kind of neat because if I had known that going in, maybe what I would have done is done a version of the book that's printed in 8 color. And I would have said, this is going to be incredibly amazing to look at. And I can print this book in 8 color. It's going to cost more money. And so I would have made like the base book. Maybe the campaign would have been for a base book that's printed in 8 color, but it would be like $40. And would that be something that the backer community would want? And I think given the fact that I have a smaller number of backers than I expected, who are putting more into the campaign than I expected, I'm thinking they want higher quality. Quality is more important. And so going into Dreamside, which I want to do next year, um, following this campaign, once everybody gets their books, once that one thing at a time. Sorry, Dreamside fans, but I've got to get this done the right way first. And then, but maybe next summer that's a possibility. And I'm thinking about things to make that campaign really special, including one thing I can't talk about that I'm really excited about. But let me just tell you, it is if I can get what I'm trying to do with Dreamside done, it will be mind blowing, totally unexpected. So that would be something that would be next summer. We'll see. But doing things like having an 8 color book would be too cool.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And I can be a testing ground for you, Jackie. So when you inevitably make your first book, I can be like, yeah, don't print it in 8 color because it's a nightmare.
That sounds
Yeah.
good to me.
Yeah. James GSR says Apple fundamentally hates mouse devices. They pushed away from them to promote their touchscreens. That might be true. I really don't know. What I often think about Apple is that they they have a way of streamlining for usability purposes, and this is my optimistic. I tend not to have a very cynical impression of things because I like to defer to people's best intentions, and I think with Apple, they one of the things that I have an iMac that I bought a few years ago, right? That's my main workstation,
Yeah.
and I noticed that the new Apple OS controls installations where if you install something from the internet, for example, that you didn't get through the App Store, which is totally controlled by Apple, then the computer won't install it unless you have a security like a pass for it, right? And
Huh.
at first it was bothering me, and I thought this is kind of annoying. Let me install what I want. And then I thought, actually, this is kind of brilliant because it ensures that nothing can be installed without your awareness. So no secretive software can be installed basically because it would just be blocked. So unless it comes from the App Store, unless I'm misunderstanding how it works, it won't install something. So no, it protects your computer, protects you against a lot of malware. And I think, okay, so that restricts my freedom as a user, but it's for my best interest. And I think with Apple, I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt with that. It's just things like the mouse drive me insane. I just don't get why I can't use a mouse, like a Bluetooth mouse with the iPad if I want to use a mouse. That seems crazy to me.
Well, so many people that don't even realize that that might have been, their main intention with the whole security thing with downloading things that aren't from the App Store.
Right. Yeah. Well, who knows? Who knows? Dragmonda says, "I can't wait to read it." Yes, I can't wait to have it done so that you can read it. Yeah, it's a fun story, Yuka, and it took a while to write, Jackie. Actually, it wasn't the longest time writing, but there was a lot of editing, as you can imagine, that goes through.
Um,
And I think it came with a lot of caveats up front because I actually wrote the story before I even played the game, and I really didn't see much of the game at all because Platonic has the same kind of notorious secrecy that
mhm.
Rare was known for and still is kind of. Where they really did not share many details with me, and I think I had to keep asking them over and over again, like, guys, how do you expect me to write a good story if I don't play the game? I don't even know who the characters are, so I wrote a story essentially based on Banjo instead, and I just kind of adapted and sort of swapped out characters and ideas as I became more aware of Yuka until I had access to the game and I could check out and make corrections as needed.
I mean, that's a clever way to go about it.
It's only possible with this story because of its reference to Banjo Kazooie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can think about it that way. It was essentially a Banjo Kazooie story that originally, and then it became ukulele, and I adapted where needed. But ukulele, it's very different from Dreamside, but it actually has a lot more in common than might be obvious because the way that I write stories is I base them on this concept called the moral premise, which is that you have a story that is basically a sort of a battle between a virtue and a vice. And you center the story around these concepts, and so even very goofy stories like ukulele can benefit from this, where you want to make sure that the character is engaging in some sort of a battle from a struggle toward virtue, or if it's an antagonizing story, a struggle toward vice. And if you can kind of, in a way, Jackie, it's like cutting the color out, right? When it comes to story, it lets me focus on the bones, the structure, and you kind of just take it one step at a time. I like to start with the ending and know what I'm trying to say with the story. So what is it? What's the point of the story? Why even make it when you close the book? What's the feeling I want you to have?
Yeah.
Um, and then you go to the beginning, and then you kind of fill in from there.
Hmm.
Yeah, and Dreamside, Jackie, Dreamside. I cannot tell you how excited I am for people to finish that story because it's three books in total. It's going to be over 450 pages of art for that story. It's a really really epic story, but just the way that it progresses and the way it ends. I'm just it's like it took years and years of just stewing, kind of like it's like a fine wine, it just aged and aged, and I was able to get all of those kind of dumb ideas out right away. Like the obvious things, what to do with the story. And I often hear people ask about, oh, what happens at the end of Dreamside, and they always ask the same question. It's always, does Sarah live? And it's funny because it's like I think back and I'm like, oh, that's the question I asked myself 10 years ago. And it's like it's scratching the surface of what the story is about. It's not even close to what I'm trying to do with it. So, I wonder, have you thought at all about, because you say that you've thought a little bit about storytelling, and I'm curious if you have any sort of passionate ideas for stories or things that you can share a little bit. I understand if you want to keep them on the down low, but I wonder if you have any specific stuff.
Not at the moment, no. I don't really have any big grand ideas. It's not something that I've tapped into enough for there to be anything worthwhile sharing. It is something that I want to explore a little bit more sometime
Mhm.
ago.
That's yes, yeah, something to move into. But you'll have those sparks of inspiration, right? I mean, uh, you'll have some sort of an image in your head, no doubt, where you just be at the right place at the right time, and you suddenly get that little spark of inspiration.
Yeah.
So for you, maybe you turn that right into an illustration. Maybe that's kind of how you think.
Yeah, I have noticed that from time to time. I mean, there's there's drawings that I haven't posted because I mean I haven't really made anything of them, but they definitely are influenced from stories that I've thought about in my free time. It
Mhm.
probably will be something that I do post eventually, just not something that's been done yet.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, Jackie, we're coming up on an hour and 20 minutes here. Time has been flying by talking to you because I feel like we could talk about art forever and also certainly geeking out about storytelling. So I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to cover before we close out here.
I see we got one of the people asking about what Dreamside is, and I think everybody should know what that is.
Well, I appreciate that, Jackie. Dragmon is what's Dreamside about? Well, Dreamside is a story about kind of on the surface. I like to think about it like the never-ending story with a medical theme. So it's about a young girl named Sarah who has a sort of it's not totally clear, but it is likely a terminal form of cancer and sort of escapes into a fantasy world with a mysterious stranger friend who's from that world and is basically on this mission to find this thing called the heart of Dreamside. And there's supposed to be some sort of an answer to what she's looking for at that location. And it is a like I said, it's a trilogy of books. It's sort of a quasi graphic novel illustrated book combo where I say the closest thing to it I think is like a shoji manga where it has open panels and the art kind of flows between the art and it does have narrative text. It's not there are no bubbles or anything like that in it. And it's been an extreme passion project. I first wrote the story a long time ago. Jack, I don't even know if you know this, but I wrote Dreamside when I finished college back in 2003, the
I
first
remember
draft.
telling me that.
Yeah, it's a long time coming, and what's been great about it is that the story has evolved a lot since that time. A lot. The fundamental theme is the same. The original vision for it was like I wanted to. I had a maybe this is something you can understand in terms of coming up with ideas. But I often just start with a kind of just one singular image that I think is intriguing, and then I can expand on it. That's that spark of inspiration I talk about, right? And for Dreamside, it was a girl in a hospital patient room, uh, staring with fascination out the window at a flying girl who is looking in at her. It's sort of like a Peter Pan kind of scene.
Okay.
And I just love the combination of the being stuck in a hospital and the desire to fly out the window. So that was the original concept of it. And it was right around the same time that sort of funny thing that happened is at the same time, I think right around 2004, there's a game developer who is now a friend of mine who founded that game company, which is why is his name eluding me? He is a friend of mine, but the game was at the time it was called Cloud, and this is the same company that made Journey and Flower.
Oh,
And so he had a similar theme that he was developing that I remember seeing in his college thesis project. And it was just funny because at the same time as this kind of sparked this idea in my head, I'm like, what am I going to do with this? And I wrote a little screenplay. And I think when I had noticed that there were other ideas that were it was resonating with, there's a little bit of Little Nemo in there, a lot of Alice in Wonderland in there. I'm like, oh, this is just it just would not leave my head, and like I need to do something with this. So I wrote it originally as a screenplay. It evolved into a different format. Eventually, just trying to just figure out some way that I could get it done the way that I wanted it to be. Like if it wasn't going to be the right way, it couldn't be done. And so eventually, that just took form in a children's book. So yeah, so thanks for asking, and it's been a long time coming. The first book is actually done, with some slight edits needed. It's probably about 92% there because I sort of halted the edits after chapter 5, of which there are not many, to work on Yuka. And so when we're going to get going with Dreamside, what's great about the intended Kickstarter campaign for Dreamside is that we'll be very close to finish. So it'll really probably only be about a 3 or 4 month, not minute, 3 or 4 month wait, I'd say for that book.
that's gonna be super exciting.
I'm excited. I'm excited to get it out there, and I'm especially excited if we can figure out this magical thing that I'm trying to do with the book that I don't want to tease about, but I can't help it because it's just too cool. Um, yeah. James GSR says, does Jackie have a book out or in the works?
No, nothing like that. I think it might have been the time that he joined and watched, but no, I'm more geared towards getting into character design for video games at the moment. That's not to say that that won't ever happen, but yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, if nothing else, then we've got to see some art books and things like that. I like to think that at some point in time we'll see you at various conventions and who knows, just to be able to. I know that you sell art prints and things like that, and various other products that have your art on there. And speaking of which, I just want to let people know that I do have links to all of Jackie's various sites. She has quite a presence in various sites. So make sure you look in the description of the video and find the links there. And you go ahead and support Jackie and her awesome art because I want to see Jackie make more and more. She will make a big dent in the industry, no doubt. Any studio would be lucky to have you, Jackie. I think.
Oh, thanks.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, James says I've been waiting for Dreamside for a long time. Yeah, tell me about it. It's a fantastic concept with the possibility to rip our hearts out in a good way. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, James. And I yeah it's so important to me that the Dreamside's story progression is not spoiled. So I don't even like to talk about where it goes. And the reason for that, but the one thing I like to say about the story is that it's really important for people, for me anyway, to have people who are following along with the progression of the book, because that's actually kind of a metaphysical tie into the story. And it's one of the reasons that I really wanted to get it out there with book one was to try and begin making a relationship with people who are following the story, because that really is kind of a key thing in terms of how the story progresses. It's an unusual concept, but what I can say is that if you had the ending spoiled, it would be the worst spoiler ever. Like to be able to get the impact of the ending, it requires not only reading from the beginning, but even spacing out reading the books
Yeah.
maybe over years, so that you can really let it sink in because it's not. The only thing I'll guarantee you is that the ending is not what you think it is. Because unless you can squeeze like 10 years of thought into like a quick impression of what it might be, but it really, I went back and forth on it and went so many different directions, and then I started going into like weird, like tertiary directions. And yeah, I better stop talking because I'll end up
I
spoiling
have a
something.
hardcore fan spending all his time analyzing the possible outcomes until he gets it right.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just on the side that's writing it, but I'm like yeah, I'm my own crazy follower trying to see what I can do with the story. It took on so many different formats, and in an earlier draft of the story, in fact, it was more of a there were actually two protagonists in the earliest forms, but the girl who is the dream girl character, she used to be another girl in the hospital who was a friend of Sarah's, and her name was Megan. And that was just it was there were so many reasons that I changed that. Primarily that it's extremely difficult to tell the story I wanted to tell with two protagonists because I was dividing too much between them, kind of giving equal treatment to both, and that's really really hard to do. You kind of have to focus on one story, and I found that by making one of them a secondary character that is uh, it not only freed up room to focus on the protagonist, but it actually improved the protagonist because it now let her secondarily, from a secondary perspective, she could amplify the power of the protagonist's story as well. So yeah, it's same thing with art. Sometimes you have to kind of pull back and simplify in order to improve. Yeah. James says, I can think of at least five great endings for it. I haven't seen an update on it in a long time, though. Yes, I know. I'm so sorry. It's the worst. I think that the problem with it, it's been honestly, it's been driving me nuts for 2 years because I have been unable to talk about Yuka, and I didn't really want to talk about Dreamside and kind of give the same information, like, yep, still waiting. And I thought, and not be able to reveal what I'm doing, because I just felt like that would really annoy people if I'm just constantly talking about Dreamside and they don't have any idea what I'm working on. And I'm like, just trust me, I'm hard at work on something. I figured the best thing for me to do might just be to just kind of shut up and just get to work on Yucca. And I thought it was only going to be about a maybe 6 month wait before I could talk about Yucca. And then the complexities of setting up this project have been massive. You know, it's there's a lot of, like, I mean, we had to go through, yeah, I haven't really talked about it, but there's like this, we had to go through and write, a contract that took months and months and months to prepare, thousands of dollars. It's a very, very costly process to get this thing going, just so that I have the rights to work with the characters properly. And and Platonic really wanted it to happen and everything, but both parties are very happy with it, but it still leads to a lot of legal hurdles to get through.
I
So
can.
yeah. But you know what's cool is now we're in a situation where we can make, it'll be a lot easier to do more of these, both with, especially with Platonic, but with other studios as well. And I do have some ideas what might be fun to do. And maybe Jackie, at some point, I'd love to have you, if we can ever be in a position where I have the budget to be able to work with somebody. It'd be a lot of fun to work with you. What do you think about that?
That would be incredible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, with your coloring sensibilities in particular, it would really be nice. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, and James says, "I hear you. Just trying to give you a little friendly push." Absolutely. And Dreamside is, we'll put it this way, James. Dreamside is going to benefit massively from this. And this was kind of the main point: is that Dreamside had the opportunity to go into publishing 2 years ago, but it wouldn't. You just have to take my word for it. It would not have been right for the project. It would not have gotten the respect I think it deserves, and it just wouldn't. It wouldn't have been right. It wasn't the right time for it. And so I think ironically, by stepping away from Dreamside, I benefit Dreamside. So I think it's going to be better for it in the end. It'll have a wider megaphone, by putting out something else first that can establish some credibility. And I just thought that was really important to do. So, unfortunately, you can't make any decision, right, Jackie? Like, you gotta take the best available option.
Well, and that's the thing too. When you do decide to start actually producing physical copies of the books, are you going to be going back and redoing or at least retouching the majority of the artwork that's going in it?
You mean for Dreamside? Well, I did that already, actually. The art has all been redone since the video books. The All the way through chapter 1 through 4, chapters 1 through 4, and the prologue are completely redone. And chapters 5, 6, and 7 have a lot less that had to be done. Basically, I had to bring chapters 1 through 4 up to the style of 7, because it wasn't until I got to chapter 7 that I really kind of finalized the style, the vibe, and everything. And so I had to go back, and also, like, just the technique, like, what sort of outlines am I working with? What are the ways that I'm using color, that sort of thing. That didn't really become fleshed out until chapter 7. And so I just had to bring 1 through 4 up because they were the biggest problems. Chapter 5 is where I actually have the most work still, because that's when they go to Dreamside, and I'm actually evolving the Dreamside design quite a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, chapter 5 is going to be very different. It'll contain the same elements, but it's going to be a lot more detailed, a lot more lush, than it has been in the videos. I don't even like people watching the videos anymore because they're they're so out of date in terms of the art. But I wanted to wait until the book is going to be printed to reveal all the new artwork. So it's all very, very different from what it was in the video books.
I mean, the videos that you have up there now are still amazing, especially if it's um, somebody who hasn't seen it before, hasn't heard of Dreamside before. They're going to be blown away. I remember the
Oh,
time that we first watched it, me and my sisters.
yes, yes. That really, I can't even tell you how much that made my day when you were telling me that your sisters were into it, and when you had made the Dream Prism
Yeah.
mock-ups. That was a lot of fun. Mhm. Yes, that was great. So, well, I'll tell you what, Jackie. I think we're coming up to the end here. Is there anything else you want to jump in and say? You want to let people know anything else where they can find you? I mean, I've got the links here, but is there anything else you want to let people know about?
Nope, those links are good. definitely going to be posting a lot more original stuff here. I'm trying to refine more of a portfolio that I can share with people and studios, um, to start actually getting my name out there and see how that goes.
Hmm. Yep, yep. And I think that's as I said, that's only a matter of time. It's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, awesome. Well, Jackie, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And I do want to let folks know that if you just have not had enough listening to me ramble on, you can come back to at midnight, actually, 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern. I'm going to be joining the Artcasters, which is, I don't even know what the channel is. But it's the Artcasters, which is hosted by my friend Scott Circlin of CircWorks. So if you go ahead and search for Artcasters, and you'll be able to find me there at 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern tonight. So see if I can keep from falling asleep before that happens.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jackie. We should do this again. This is a lot of fun. I'd love to
Yeah.
see your progress into 3D. Inevitably, you'll be a master by the next time we do this.
I'll share everything.
Yeah, and I look forward to seeing it. All right, thanks for joining me, Jackie, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Okay, and bye, everybody. Thanks for coming by. All right.